ticking.
Clear! Hard cover! No! Go, go, go!
If you've watched enough thrillers, you probably think you know exactly what sets a story in motion. A ticking bomb, a looming disaster, a city about to explode. But every once in a while a film comes along that quietly flips that expectation on its head. And that's exactly what happened when I started digging into Fuze. At first glance, the premise sounds simple. A construction crew in the middle of London discovers something buried beneath the ground. Not a pipe, not an old foundation, a bomb. And not just any bomb. We're talking about a massive unexploded device weighing nearly 500 pounds, most likely left behind during World War II, possibly from the Blitz. If that thing detonates, it could flatten several city blocks. Naturally, the entire area is locked down almost immediately. Emergency crews rush in. Police begin evacuating buildings. Streets empty out. Tension starts building. On paper, that's the perfect recipe for a high adrenaline thriller, but here's where things start getting interesting. Because very early on, it becomes clear that the bomb itself might not actually be the real story. Director David Mackenzie approaches this film with the same intense seriousness that made Hell or High Water so compelling. There's no flashy spectacle here, no over-the-top action sequences trying to distract you. Instead, the tension creeps in slowly, almost methodically, like a fuse quietly burning in the background. At the center of the situation is Major Will Tranter, played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson. And from the moment he appears on screen, you can tell this is not a man who does things by the book. Tranter is a bomb disposal expert, but he's also a sniper. That combination alone tells you everything about the type of character we're dealing with. He's calm under pressure, but also dangerously comfortable taking risks. Protocol doesn't mean much to him if it gets in the way of solving the problem. While most experts would keep their distance from a bomb this size, Tranter studies it almost obsessively, determined to disarm it with minimal damage, and honestly, watching him work is one of the film's most compelling elements. There's this quiet confidence about him that makes you think he's already calculated 10 moves ahead. At one point, he even pours himself a drink before the operation is finished, as if he already knows how the story ends. Meanwhile, another key figure enters the picture. Susanna, played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw, is a high-ranking police officer responsible for protecting civilians and coordinating the evacuation. While Tranter focuses on the bomb itself, she's looking at the bigger picture, and that's when the film begins planting seeds of suspicion. Among the residents leaving nearby buildings is a man named Rahim. He's an immigrant who speaks Dari and lives in one of the apartments close to the construction site, along with his elderly parents. The camera lingers on him just long enough to make you wonder if there's something more going on, and let's be honest, when thrillers introduce a character like this in the middle of a crisis, most audiences immediately start trying to connect the dots. Is he involved? Is he hiding something? Is he part of the bigger plan? That psychological trick is one of the clever ways the film plays with expectations. It quietly lets the audience's own assumptions do some of the storytelling, but even if you think you've figured things out early, Fuze has another layer waiting, because while everyone is focused on the bomb, something else is happening beneath the surface, and this is where Theo James enters the story. His character, Karalis, doesn't immediately announce himself as the villain. In fact, the film keeps his true intentions deliberately vague at first. He speaks with a thick South African accent and moves with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. Soon, it becomes clear that Karalis and his crew are using the chaos surrounding the bomb as cover. While the authorities scramble to secure the area, they slip into a nearby bank through a rear entrance. Their target is a vault hidden inside. Bank AI Marakaba, and suddenly the movie shifts gears. What looked like a bomb disposal thriller slowly reveals itself to be something else entirely. A heist, but even then, the story refuses to settle into something predictable, because the real question isn't just what they're stealing, it's why. Sam Worthington appears as part of Karalis' team, and his presence adds another layer of intrigue. These aren't ordinary criminals. The way they operate suggests military precision, almost like a covert operation rather than a simple robbery. As the crew begins drilling through the vault wall, the film starts weaving together two separate timelines of tension. On one side, Trantor is working against the clock, trying to neutralize a potentially catastrophic bomb on the other side. Karalis and his men are executing a plan that clearly required months of preparation, and the deeper you go into the story, the harder it becomes to tell who the real enemy is. One of the things I found fascinating about Fuze is how it blurs the line between hero and villain. Trantor might technically be the protagonist, but he's not exactly portrayed as a flawless hero. His reckless approach constantly puts others at risk. At the same time, Karalis isn't presented as a cartoonish criminal either. There's a strange code of honor operating within his group, something that almost feels reminiscent of classic European crime films. If you've ever seen Jean-Pierre Melville's films like Army of Shadows or Le Cercle Rouge, you might recognize that same quiet sense of professionalism among criminals who operate by their own rules, and that atmosphere adds a surprising level of sophistication to the story. Now here's something I'm curious about. While watching the film, did you find yourself rooting for one side more than the other? Or did the story keep shifting your perspective as new information appeared? Because that moral ambiguity is clearly intentional. As the heist unfolds, more questions start piling up. Was the bomb really left behind during the Blitz? Or was it placed there intentionally to create the perfect distraction? What exactly is inside that vault that makes it worth risking an operation of this scale? And perhaps the biggest mystery of all, what is Karalis' true endgame? The film doesn't rush to answer these questions. Instead, it lets the tension simmer while the different storylines begin colliding in unexpected ways. There are moments when things start to fall apart, plans go wrong, trust begins to fracture, alliances shift, and that's when the story becomes less about the bomb and more about loyalty, because eventually the film reveals something that completely reframes the motivations of several characters. Without spoiling the final moments, I'll just say this: the most explosive scene in Fuze isn't the one you're expecting. It's not the bomb, it's the moment when we finally understand why three of these characters remain fiercely loyal to each other while everyone else seems ready to betray whoever they need to in order to survive. That revelation hits like a delayed detonation, and suddenly everything that came before it starts making sense. Now, is Fuze a perfect thriller? Not quite. There are definitely moments where the plot feels slightly tangled. Some questions linger longer than they probably should. And if you look too closely, a few narrative gaps start to appear. For example, how exactly did a bomb of that size end up beneath a modern construction site without anyone noticing for decades? Who actually owns the vault that Karalis is targeting? And why does it seem like Zuzana is the only person actively trying to stop the entire operation? These are the kinds of questions that might cross your mind while watching. But interestingly, they don't completely derail the experience, because what Fuze does extremely well is maintain a constant sense of tension. Director David Mackenzie refuses to let the story become static. Every time things start to slow down, something unexpected shifts the momentum again. The bomb squad dynamics feel authentic. The criminal operation feels calculated, and the performances from the cast elevate the material far beyond what could have been a standard streaming thriller. Aaron Taylor-Johnson gives Trantor a strange mix of arrogance and charm that keeps the character unpredictable. Theo James clearly enjoys playing Karalis, leaning fully into the character's calculated menace, and Gugu Mbatha-Raw grounds the entire story with a performance that constantly reminds us what's actually at stake. Even when the narrative starts leaning toward familiar territory, the actors keep the tension alive, and that ultimately becomes the film's biggest strength. Fuze may not reinvent the thriller genre, but sometimes you don't need a revolutionary concept to deliver a compelling story. Sometimes all it takes is a strong director, a cast that fully commits to their roles, and a narrative that keeps you questioning what's really happening beneath the surface. And if you're anything like me, by the time the final scene arrives, you might realize the movie's title wasn't just referring to the bomb. It was referring to everything: the tension, the secrets, the chain reaction of choices made by every character along the way. Now I'm genuinely curious what you think about this one. Did the twist involving Karalis surprise you, or did you see it coming earlier in the film? And more importantly, did the ending work for you? Either way, Fuze proves that even a story built around a bomb doesn't always explode the way you expect, and sometimes the most dangerous thing in a thriller isn't the weapon, it's the plan behind it. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoy breaking down films like this as much as I do, stick around, because there are plenty more stories hiding beneath the surface, and we're just getting started.